Anyways, here we are. We're gonna hop into some Daisy Cousins, who affects like the worst accent. Do this. This isn't her thing here. That she's trying to make her sound, I don't know, more intelligent. But here we go into uh, the Pennsylvania hearings.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all well. So, despite what I'm sure you have heard in the news, the battle for the presidency continues to continue in the USA. Good grief. Now, I know I've made quite a bit of election content and I am actively trying to stop making it because it is tiring, but stuff just keeps happening that is too important to gloss over, particularly as the mainstream media is either lying about what's happening or simply not covering the key points. And that is what I want to talk about today. Something potentially groundbreaking happened in Pennsylvania on Wednesday last week, in Gettysburg of all places, that could have volcanic consequences for the outcome of the election if followed to its difficult but logical conclusion. But before I
No, she's lying about that. No, she's gonna shill. And since this is early in the video, and it's gonna get clipped for the VOD, for YouTube and stuff. Hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, leave a comment. Let me know what you think as the video goes on. So let's get past stuff.
do at the start of each video. Additionally, from December 1st to 31st, I will be donating $1 for every piece you divorce or separation. They include when near enough support services if you all like my new merch release. Okay, so the big thing that happened last week was a Pennsylvania Republican Senate committee hearing hosted by GOP Senator Doug Mastriano, in which Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani and legal advisor Jenna Ellis, along with multiple witnesses, gave testimony and answered questions about what allegedly happened in Pennsylvania throughout the election process. Now, the hearing featured a range of testimony from a variety of people. Some testimony was stronger than others, of course, but all of it was very compelling. And the concern the Republican...
I've seen the hearing conference and stuff. It's not compelling at all. Yeah, the poor stain, poor stuff. Yeah. And that's one of the things we want to try to fix. We're back to this, but yeah, the hearings are not... Uh-oh, what did I hit? No, I didn't want to... Ooh, what did I do? Bump my, Alright, so let's delete that. I bumped my, Stream Deck. But no, it's largely a lot of these accusations and things that don't matter. So, she's gonna bring up later. She's gonna cut out the two biggest bombshells that she thinks are there. And they're things that we've heard before that have been dismissed in court, been laughed out.
Senators had was very evident. And considering the fact that Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution states that it is the legislature that has the final say on which electors are sent to vote in the Electoral College, this kind of hearing should be of great interest to anyone following the election, especially journalists and media organizations.
So she brings up Article 2, and she's wrong about some stuff, right? So the Article 2 says that the state legislatures get to pick the electors. That is correct. But these legislatures have laws and procedures to follow. And the Supreme Court and case law and all that other stuff has said that there are it's in was it Article 3, I think? Or it's in another subsection of Article 2 that says that the federal government can limit certain things and how states do things, right? That exists in there that she doesn't bring up, won't ever bring that there. So based on that, based on all like the legislatures having a way to elect electors, right? So Pennsylvania says, oh, we're going to elect electors that are those of the popular vote, right, in the state. And the electors, if you don't know how electors are selected, each party has a set of electors that they have. So if they win Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania selects, the Democratic electors that they put forward, right? And that's the process. If Trump had won it, they would go there. Now, the overturning that she's going to try to go here, there's a federal piece of legislation that says, essentially says that if there's some issue and it wasn't decided on the day, but what's the day mean? What does that include? I don't know, but I've seen this there that they can go and reselect electors, and so they say, well, this is the piece of federal legislation that the Pennsylvania, the Republican in the Pennsylvania legislature could try to appeal to use. But I mean, does that mean that, well, oh, even though all the votes were cast and everything was followed, and you didn't accept ballots beyond 8 o'clock on election night, right? Even from absentee ballots, does that mean just because they weren't all counted yet? Does that mean you can go and do it? I doubt it, right? I doubt that would be sufficient justification. I bet that would fall down in the courts, even if it went up to the Supreme Court, because the legislature already put through the rules for how they select electors and how the elections are conducted and how they're won and things like that. So I imagine that would get struck down in court. But that's the only glimmer, right? It's not just, oh, well, legislature can do whatever the fuck they want when they want it, and it's a conservative legislature, so we can do that. We can violate previously established laws. Not the case. So she's lying to her audience already.
At least it would be if journalists weren't largely thumb-sucking Democratic partisan hacks. Now, I've spoken in previous videos about how the mainstream media has been lying through its teeth about the legal efforts of the Trump campaign. The media has insisted Team Trump has zero evidence of fraud or irregularities. Now, this is a blatant lie. Team Trump has hundreds of pages of evidence in the form of sworn affidavits, which are legally considered evidence when presented on penalty of perjury in a court. They've also
No, so when they say they have no evidence, it's not lying, right, to say that. They have no... Yeah, there's definitely not... I mean, they have no real strong evidence of voter fraud, and, you know, Barr's right to say that there's none that... Even if there was some, there's not enough to overturn the election, because we're looking at hundreds of thousands of votes. They have to get invalidated across multiple states to even come close to overturning the election. But when they say no evidence, it's no good evidence. So somebody, you know, signing an affidavit saying this or that isn't strong evidence that anything was violated procedure or anything that they're alleging actually happened, right? You know, we all know in the court of law that witness testimony is the least reliable form of evidence. So when they're saying there is no evidence, they're saying there's no sufficient evidence of voter fraud. And many of the things that are claimed are just people that don't understand the written procedures as is, and they're claiming stuff. Or it's like, oh, I overheard somebody say this, and so it's hearsay, so it's not actually evidence, even though it's a sworn affidavit. Right? It's just like, I heard so-and-so say this, and it's like, oh, that's hearsay, we can't admit that to court. And that's why he's been laughed out of court consistently.
Fallaciously insisted that Trump keeps getting laughed out of court.
That's true.
Not true. Team Trump has had quite a few legal victories, actually, most notably in Nevada and Pennsylvania. And of the lawsuits that have
No, they haven't
been dismissed, they can usually be appealed. A dismissal is not the end of the road. Anyone with a very basic understanding of these things will know that. Honestly, I didn't...
Yeah, they can be appealed, but that's, you know, you still lost, and on appeal, which is really weird that Trump supporters like Daisy, I don't know if Daisy's done it, but others on Twitter will go and say, well, they'll present their evidence in the appeal. That's why they went so quick to get it dismissed. It's like, no, in appeal you can only work with what was actually submitted. Yeah, it's no, your case got dismissed. It's bad, and some of them were dismissed with prejudice, which means if I believe correctly, can't actually be appealed. So they had several losses that were dismissed with prejudice, but yeah, there's a lot of claim that, well, we'll bring evidence to the appeal and stuff. Well, you can't do that, right? You can only appeal the stuff that you already brought in the original decision. So the appeals mean fuck all.
I didn't think media coverage of this election could get any worse until last week with their coverage of this Pennsylvania Senate committee hearing, or I should say lack thereof. Here's why a lot of you most likely will have no idea what happened during this hearing, why it's a big deal, or in some cases that it even happened at all. In a perfect world with a truthful media, the lead up to this hearing would have garnered enormous interest. I mean, finally, a public forum airing all of the much touted evidence by the Trump campaign with potentially big consequences for the election. It should have been a journalist's paradise. But we don't live in a perfect world, and we certainly don't have a truthful mainstream media.
So them not covering them is not being truthful, right? We followed all the cases. We've seen all the affidavit, all the evidence they've put forward. We can go and find them in court records. People have picked through this, right? Like, so I recommend, like, if you drop by YouTube and stuff, Legal Eagle has been covering a lot of these cases and the alleged things that are said. They have access to the affidavits, and it's laughable. Like, the case for trying to throw out these votes is 100% laughable.
Prior to the hearing, there was only a smattering of coverage from major outlets. But rather than outlining the hearing's purpose and potential consequences, these outlets simply disparaged it, saying it was a fake hearing, putting hearing in inverted commas because apparently these journalists think they're witty. Their grounds for dismissing the hearing as a fake hearing was because it was held in a hotel ballroom rather than in Congress in Pennsylvania, so therefore it wasn't a real legislative hearing, and it was all just silliness because the Trump team has no evidence, and in any case the votes have already been certified in Pennsylvania, so ha! Rachel Maddow's commentary sums up this attitude.
I should tell you the Trump campaign also announced excitedly today that there's going to be what they're calling a hearing by the Pennsylvania State Senate on the conduct of the presidential election in Pennsylvania. Ooh, a legislative hearing, you say, in Pennsylvania, even after they've already just certified the vote there? They're going to hold a legislative hearing investigating the election? Really? After certification, they are? No, actually, read the fine print here. They're calling it a Pennsylvania State Senate hearing. But this legislative hearing is not at the Pennsylvania State Senate. It's not at the legislature. It's not even in the capital city. It's just Republicans in Pennsylvania going to a hotel in Gettysburg, the Wyndham Hotel, unless perhaps it's Wyndham Total Landscaping. And at the hotel, they're going to hear a presentation from Rudy Giuliani.
Okay,
So, yeah, Maddow snark aside and all that other stuff. She didn't lie about any of that stuff in there. Now, I don't know whether or not state hearings or anything to do here, but you certified the election. You signed off on it already, right? And these cases have been dismissed, several of them, with prejudice in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. It's not evidence that's going to do anything, right? And so there would be a legal challenge, basically, if they tried to invoke the federal statute that said, well, it wasn't decided on the day, which some suggest means election day, but does that mean that even though all the votes were cast on election day, or by election day, followed all the rules and stuff, that, well, we didn't have them counted by election day, so we can ignore these? I can't imagine, even with the majority in the Supreme Court for conservatives, that gets through, because Trump's own appointed justices at these lower courts have been laughing him out. Yeah, that is insane. That it's like, oh, it's the deep state, all this stuff in the swamp and all that stuff. It's like Trump appointed all those fuckers, and they all say he's dumb and throwing it out.
Rachel's spiel, which matches the offering from the rest of the mainstream media generally, we can only glean that she seriously has no idea how the American electoral system works or the content of the US Constitution, which she should know being a political commentator, but whatever.
Again, I have no idea where she's from. Sounds maybe she's from Australia, maybe, or UK, or if she's an American, she's trying to put on that transatlantic voice that she's missing for some kind of Brit thing. But no, there's things beyond just you don't understand this. Like, there's case law, so we work under a common law system, so there's decisions, there's precedents, and all that other stuff that goes beyond just what was written in certain things. But she's also leaving out, like I said earlier, she's leaving out, I forget if it's Article 3 or if it's Section 2, another subsection of Section 2, that talks about that the federal government can put legal requirements and stuff on how electors are chosen, in addition to the states. And so, as long as the state, that's why they'd have to appeal to Pennsylvania would have to appeal to this federal law, and in court, I would imagine it'd get struck down because the votes were cast on the day. So technically, we know on the day, or we don't know on the day, but like the votes have already been cast, the decision's already been decided on the day. It's just it takes a week and a half to get everything counted with all the excess mail-in ballots, and so that it wouldn't fly under that reading. And that's like their only hope for the legislature to come out of this hearing to go and say, can we get this stuff here? But like, you can't get these affidavits and all this other stuff put forward, and his lawyers have to walk back and say, well, we're not alleging fraud. No, that's not what we're alleging here. And it's like, oh, here's 200 ballots or whatever that we have an issue with. All right, you lost by 30,000 or 40,000, 100,000, depending on which state you're looking at. And you're like, all right, 500 ballots not going to do anything, right? So unless you're alleging fraud beyond that, your case is meritless. Oh yeah, it is. It's going to get more pathetic all the way through. I hope that them running around. So I had a idea pop into my head when talking about the primaries earlier this year, and we're like, Bernie's not getting the support coming out there. He's underperforming what the polls say he's going to get. What's going on? And one of the things that I hypothesized going through was, well, it's a lot of the hardcore Bernie supporters that are online and stuff that are talking about this online, whether it's podcasts or people like Vosh and if you want to go like Schumann, and it's like, oh, the election's rigged, the election's rigged, the election's rigged, the election's rigged. And it's like, so the young people just didn't bother to come out for Bernie, even though they support him in huge numbers, because they think the election's rigged. It's not going to go to him. So what's the point in voting? I don't know if that's true or not. There was some stuff that came out later that Trump, that the Democrats from. Hey, thanks for the follow. Oh yeah, very funny, dude. They what does it say? That like Democratic operatives had like internal memos and stuff going around talking about how Biden and other Democrats should talk about this election, right? While Trump said they're going to try to steal the election, is going to be rigged election, all this stuff. Well, leading up to the election, I said, don't talk about that, because if you talk about it being rigged or that Trump is going to steal the election, we're worried that our voters aren't going to come out. And now we see today, to tie it into today, we have there was that big press conference where was it Ronna McDaniels was down in Georgia talking about getting out to vote, and she had people in the audience said, well, what's the point of voting? They're just going to steal it again anyways, right? And so I hope that I don't like voter suppression and stuff kind of that way, but in terms of winning, if they're going to shoot themselves in the foot by saying that the Democrats are going to rig it and steal the election and stuff, that it keeps a Republican turnout low and we get Ossoff and Warnock in, all more power to us, right? But yeah, it's like talking about how the election isn't fair, it's rigged and all this other stuff, and you can't win. Hey, people aren't going to go out and vote. It's not going to be worth their time. They're going to make the rational decision to sit home.
What Rachel and a lot of
or in the case of the presidential election, not vote by mail.
Others don't seem to realize is that votes can be decertified. All it takes is a court order or, and this is the big bit, as outlined in the Constitution, if the state legislature disputes them. Article 2, remember. Also, this hearing was never actually billed.
So no, that's not what's said in Article 2, that they dispute them and stuff like there. So they'd have to appeal to this one specific federal law, which is different from what she's arguing with the those two. But the court order, they're not going to get a court order out of this hearing, right? Because they have to go through the courts to get it, and they're 1 in 46, 1 in 48, 1 in 49, something like that. Like, they're getting stomped in the courts. So you're not going to get that court order.
Billed as an official legislative hearing. Rachel and others have made that up. It was only ever billed as a Senate committee hearing. They happen all the time. Not everyone necessarily needs to attend, and they don't have to take place in official locations of the state. Rachel has simply told a lie in order to discredit the procedure. Then the hearing occurred, with again nary a peep out of journalists. No live analysis or anything, just radio silence for 3.5 hours. It was like they were trying to memory hold it by pretending that it wasn't happening. So since I'm guessing you good
Or hear me out, this might be crazy. These affidavits and stuff, they've seen them. There's no merit to them, right? As the courts have consistently shown, because they'll talk about the court cases and the court losses constantly. Right? So bringing out stuff that you tried to bring to the courts and got smacked down on, I mean, it's not some groundbreaking thing that we got to report on. Like, oh no, devastating evidence in the Pennsylvania hearing. It's like, we already know this information. We've already seen the affidavits.
people simply do not have time to sit and watch 3.5 hours of testimony. I have done it for you because I have the time, because it is my job. So in this video, I have done what these legacy journalists should have done, which is highlight some of the more interesting, more compelling testimony for you so you can absorb it and form your own opinion. I've also put the whole hearing in the video description, just in case you do have 3.5 hours spare. But first,
so she's going to go into this. So she's about halfway through her video. 3.5 hour hearing, right? She's going to have 2 clips, 2 speakers that are going to make arguments that we've already heard before. And, oh, they should have said this and did all this. So this is her best, or what she thinks is the best evidence of fraud.
First, let me make it very clear, more for the YouTube reviewers who I know will be reviewing this video. I am not commenting on the veracity of any of these claims. I am not pushing any conspiracies. I am simply relaying what was said in the hearing and demonstrating the media's reaction to it.
No, you're pushing conspiracies, right? Media's lying, right, about this hearing. They're not following the simple logical conclusion of these statements, right? No, you're arguing in favor of this. You're pushing a conspiracy. Right now, you're just trying to gaslight everybody who watches this.
Just so we're clear, no conspiracies, no misinformation.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Mike. But somebody's got to call them out. They're huge. Like, what does she have? She's got almost 200,000 subscribers, and she's not the largest one pushing this shit. Right? I mean, we got to push back on it. We got to find somebody or push back on it to some extent and get the right information out there. And if it's not going to be trusted coming from the mainstream media news, you know, it's mainstream news, that's a weird way to say it, but it's got to come from us on the ground that looked into this stuff and say, hey, no, she's lying about this, not right about it.
Just what was said by people who have signed affidavits under penalty of perjury. Here we go.
The Philadelphia Board of Elections processed hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots with zero civilian oversight or observation. The mail-in ballots were handled, processed, opened, and counted in Hall F of the Convention Center. Hall F is a vast room, approximately 350 feet by 350 feet. That's about 120,000 square feet. The Board of Elections erected a fence approximately 50 feet into the hall that ran the length of the room. All observers were corralled behind the fence. More than 100 board workers were processed and opened mail-in ballots on the other side of the fence. These masked workers were arranged throughout the 120,000 square feet at a distance from the observers of about 10 feet to more than 200 feet away from us. Unlike what some may have reported in the media, the vast majority, and I'd estimate at least 96% of the board workers were processing mail-in ballots 15 to 200 plus feet from us. Due to the distance of the workers from the erected fences, it was impossible for me or any observer to see what the workers were doing with any type of specificity. The observers were not able to challenge any decision or determination being made about the processing of these mail-in ballots.
I personally observed.
So, that bit of information is something we've already known, and the courts have laughed out. Trump appointees have laughed out, right? So that's one of the most compelling arguments of stealing the election. And she understands how electoral politics works in the U.S., my friends.
observed USB V cards being uploaded to the voting machines by the voting machine warehouse supervisor on multiple occasions. I saw this personally. I brought it to the attention of the deputy sheriff who was there stationed, who was a senior law enforcement officer, and I brought it to the attention of the clerk of elections. I brought it to their attention. I objected, and I said, this person is not being observed. He's not part of the process that I can see, and he's walking in with baggies, which we have pictures of, and it was submitted in our affidavits, and he was sticking these USBs into the machines. So I personally witnessed over that happened 24 times, over 24 times. We have multiple other witnesses that saw it, including Democrat poll watchers. And we were told, I was told the next day by the solicitors, well, actually not the solicitor, but the attorney that we had secured, that they said every election they leave a couple of USBs in the voting machines and they're brought back, and generally the warehouse manager comes over and puts them in. So in talking to the U.S. Attorney General McSwain and other law enforcement officers, I found out that was not the case, that generally, more than two is unusual. So they denied they did it, but as of today, 47 USB V cards are missing.
So how did the media report on the...
So, I have no clue on what this... I couldn't find anything searching on this here. Now, there was 47 USB cards missing or taken, but the reporting on that was from back in, I think, October. Early October, somebody broke in and stole some USB cards from in Pennsylvania. That's not from post-election. That's not from anything there, right? So if they're missing, they're not put into anything. Nothing has been lost. Those USB drives being missing, right? If they're still missing or whatever, I haven't found out. I haven't found any additional reporting on that. But they're citing something that happened well before the election, had no impact on the election, right? From all the information I could dig up. And that's their evidence of fraud in this case.
hearing afterwards? Well, much like the lead-up, the commentary did not focus on the substance, only superfluous low-hanging fruit. Again, the fact that it was held in a hotel ballroom, or that Trump was meant to attend and didn't end up going, as if that's somehow big news. Or they focused on Trump phoning in to address the committee, insisting that he was rambling and reiterating debunked claims. Well, yes, Trump was a bit rambling. You'll have to forgive him that. I'm sure he's exhausted and really over everything. But all he was doing, in general terms, was repeating what the witnesses had already alleged. Another quite heinous thing journalists did was not only not mention the names of these witnesses, but often not mention there were any other witnesses at all. From most of the reporting, you'd think the only people at the hearing were a few Republican senators, Rudy Giuliani, and Donald Trump via phone call.
I mean, just because they don't report the names of everybody who said anything at the hearing does not mean that reads that way, right? Like, at all. Like, this is a weird complaint to have of the reporting of this.
But my favorite attempt to completely ignore the substance of the hearing was the media assertion that the hearing was a COVID risk. For example, the New York Times, that self-professed bastion of truth and journalistic integrity, only covered the hearing 2 times. In its general blogs, in little bit pieces. The first bit, buried in what they call their transition blog, focused on Trump's lack of attendance. The second little bit mentioned was in their live COVID blog, and all it really said was how Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani's son had tested positive to COVID, and oh, how terrible that some of the attendees at the hearing weren't wearing masks. That was the extent of the New York Times' coverage of what is potentially a turning point in the election. And of course, as we know with live blogs, entries get buried in about 10 minutes with new live updates.
So, that's not them lying, but do you think if this was really a turning point in the election? It's not. It's a joke. Nothing's going to come about this, right? This is all big theater for Trump fundraising, right? He raised almost $200 million since the election to cover his losses. Right, so it's to scam his supporters out of money. Not going to turn anything over.
CNN, another professed bastion of truth and journalistic
Because even, let's go this far. Let's say Pennsylvania does flip and Trump does get it. Whatever, fine, he gets it. Biden still wins. Still wins.
integrity was even worse in the fact that they did attempt to cover the substance of the hearing, but lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. The article they produced was a complete and very deliberate misrepresentation of the facts. This included everything from denying the legitimacy of the event itself to fallaciously saying that Team Trump's claims are baseless. Gosh, that's getting old. To a COVID
I mean, they are baseless. Courts have said they're baseless, right? We know this, they're baseless.
dig, to falsely portraying Trump's legal efforts as continually collapsing or getting laughed out of court. I have put the article in the video description. I encourage
They have been getting laughed out of court consistently by Trump's own appointees.
you to read the whole thing. Then there was this paragraph. State and local election officials have said there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud, and both the federal court and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court have dismissed lawsuits seeking to prevent the state from certifying the results of the election. Pennsylvania officially certified the results on Tuesday, sealing Biden's win in the key battleground state. Okay, first of all, it's the state and local election officials who are being accused of perpetrating the shenanigans. Asking them to confirm that there is no evidence of said shenanigans is like asking a bank robber whether or not they've robbed a bank. Second,
No, it isn't, right? So they have investigative teams that go and dig into claims that come out, right? So we're going to cover a Salty Cracker video later about some claims in Georgia that were already, they had already seen the video, they had already, did all the investigation into it, and it was a big nothing burger. But the video got dropped by OAN, and people on the right are losing their fucking shit over it. That, oh no, election fraud, we got it.
a judge in Pennsylvania
So, they do these stuff. They check this stuff here, they recanvass, they do all this other stuff, and they can't to try to find the voter fraud. And it's, they're not finding it, right? This isn't the people that had committed it, right? So this isn't, it wouldn't be like a certain precinct had. This would be something that would be ran by like the Secretary of State, right? And the election commission of whatever the state you're in.
Pennsylvania did call a halt to the certification of the remainder of the results in the state, that is, those other than the presidential race. So that's a blatant lie from CNN. And third, the certification of the presidential race doesn't seal anything. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, results can be decertified by a court order. Now,
A court order you're not going to get because you keep losing in court, right? Pretending that this is a path forward is not a path forward.
this isn't expert level stuff. All you need to do is a little bit of research on how the courts work, read a little bit of the US Constitution, and not be a disgusting liar. 3 very simple things, all of which CNN failed miserably to do.
Again, and you didn't read very much of the Constitution because you missed the other portion. That's why you keep claiming, well, the legislature can do whatever they want. Legislature can do whatever they want. And, you said otherwise, in big contradiction, is, well, they need a court order to decertify. And they can decertify with a court order. And it's like, well, so, doesn't seem you're presenting the information completely accurately, or you really don't have a fucking clue on how this stuff works. You found somebody wrote, oh, the legislature gets to select the electors, so they get to do this stuff. Yeah, sure they do. They get to select how that works. But they have it in law already on how they select that stuff, right? Which is why you need the courts, and you need, for them to win, as I've said earlier, and I've just repeated this point again and again, but I got to hammer it home because she lies so much about it. You have to appeal to this piece of federal legislation and hope that you can get it, say, well, because we didn't have all the results in there, whatever the results were on the day of are the results because of this chaos and stuff. We've demonstrated enough chaos to do that stuff. It's like, I don't think that would hold up in court, right? From everything I've been reading, it seems unlikely. If they're going to push that way, that's the way they got to push, but it seems highly unlikely that the courts would rule that that's what it means, that, well, whatever results we had on election day are the results, even though all these other votes that we're counting were submitted by election day by the certain time frame, so they got to be counted too, right? So the election was decided on election day. We just don't have the results counted yet. I can't imagine the courts, even with the majority they have in the Supreme Court, ruling that you know, they weren't counted on election day and finished by election day, those votes don't count. There's nothing in any kind of legal precedent that would work that way.
Not surprising though, considering the authors of this article included Caitlin I Don't Call on Activists Collins.
Haley, why can't you call on all of us? You haven't taken I don't call on activists.
And Mr. Dear Diary himself, Jim Acosta. All in all, this is the absolute worst I've ever seen the media. This is the most dishonest they have ever been. Which raises one question. Why? Why did they particularly double down to suppress any commentary on what was said in the hearing and try to deter the general public from watching it by claiming it was baseless and illegitimate? Could it be, maybe, the media is a little bit afraid? The media is lying to you. They are telling you the opposite of the truth and hardly anybody realizes it. So please share this video.
No, they're not lying to you, right? This is your conspiracy theory, right?